Okay, awesome. So we have 16 people with us. So let's get started. So, all right, great. So, Paul, a very warm welcome to the next episode, the second episode of our talk show, which is about C-suite reflection and new and upcoming trends in the world. And this is about assessments and how technology is making inroads into assessments world and what AI can do. We have with us today Paul, who is from BIOS, South Africa. And Paul would love to have a quick introduction. Paul carries very rich experience in assessments and development journeys across different clients in South Africa, including banking, contact centers, mining, manufacturing, and many others. And we are very excited to have this conversation with him today on how he has experienced assessments and development journeys and what really is going to be the future. So, Paul, a very warm welcome and would love to start with your introduction and then we can go into the details.
Great. Thanks so much, Nikita, and welcome to everyone. It's great to be here and to have the opportunity to engage with you all. I'm not going to go into sort of a heavy introduction, but just high level. So I'm a director at BIOS Southern Africa, and I've been with the business since 2014, so a number of years already. So my primary responsibilities with the business is focusing on marketing and business development. But at the same time, I'm a registered organizational psychologist. So a lot of my career has been spent in the assessment landscape. Um, Really, that's where my career has started, and have a lot of interest in the evolving trends in the assessment space. So looking forward to the discussion today, and looking at the intersection between AI and assessments.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. And just to give a quick one-liner also on BIOS, it stands with long-standing reputation and deep expertise when it comes to science of assessments. Some of the tools are extremely powerful when it comes to personality assessment, motives, and drivers. We are partnering with BIOS on taking assessments globally and in India. So our discussion today will start with evolving world of assessments with AI, moving into how this translates into data for real world actions and some of the decisions that organizations need to take on the back of assessment data. And then how do we make individual development plans implementable, actionable, and scalable. So, with that, let's dive into the details. And Paul, here is my first question. So, how are you observing newer technologies like AI or many other technologies that are coming up with established principles of psychometrics and assessment science?
Um, Great, thanks for the question. So yeah, where to begin? I mean, I'm lucky enough to have seen the evolvement of assessments over the years. So all the way back to when assessments were paper and pencil based. So I'm showing my age a little bit, but I was involved in assessments in those days when we used to take the paper and pencil assessments to our clients. And then quite quickly that moved into online assessments, which we are very active in at the moment at BIOS Southern Africa. And then over the last 5 years, we've already seen this trend come about looking at gamification. So I'm
Mhm.
sure a lot of you, a lot of the audience have come across gamified assessments. And then now, of course, moving into AI, which is obviously happening very, very rapidly. And it's of course a very, very exciting space to see how it's going to evolve over time. So I guess the first thing to say around that is, the way I see AI in relation to assessments, the traditional assessments, is that it's really going to augment it. So I
Mhm.
don't necessarily see AI as replacing the traditional online assessments that we use, but to actually complement those assessments in different ways. So really what I'm observing in the market is that AI is really being infused into assessments in three different ways or three different stages. So it's what I sort of call the input, the throughput, and the output. So the input would be when we're looking at the actual assessment itself and the candidate experience, there's an AI component to that. So it might be things like AI avatars or chatbots, which form part of the assessment process itself through to the throughput, which is really about introducing AI into the algorithms and the scoring of the assessments. And that's something we are busy with at the moment at BIOS with one of our strategic capability assessments. So we're utilizing AI and fusing that into the throughput component of assessments. And then also the outputs. So the outputs would be looking at how you utilize AI when it comes to report generation, or how you utilize AI when it comes to development, which is obviously a very, very important component of assessments, probably something which is underutilized. So I think AI has a very, very big role when it comes to development, and we're seeing that a lot with our clients. We're seeing a lot of requests from our clients around how can we use AI to make that more efficient. So that's some of the use cases where we're seeing AI being infused. And I think for me, one of the sort of the crucial questions is as this evolves, and like I said, it's evolving very rapidly, is to ensure that the science is there. So being a psychologist myself, when I look at assessments, that's obviously very important. So is it scientifically robust? How does the science compare to the well-proven, well-researched traditional assessments? And I think that question is therefore going to be, critical when it comes to AI assessments, and as that gets implemented rapidly within companies globally. So that's something to focus on. And obviously, Nikita, with your experience, in your company, I know maybe you can just, share some thoughts as well around, how your business, how your company puts in, certain guardrails into place when it comes to the science behind AI.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I think thank you for that wonderful perspective. I love the fact that, how at the entire value chain before I really respond to your question, I would say that the value chain of input, throughput, and output, and how AI has varied applications to bring this whole experience together and make it really data backed and high on user engagement is so important, right? So I really love that fact, uh, and I've seen some of the cases with when you are trying to experiment and talk to customers about that. So definitely a very strong believer. When it comes to guardrails that are needed and we have to constantly work towards as an engineering company, I would say we follow three core principles. First is that the psychometric models are basically the foundation of any method or any output that we are looking at. So, Big Five, DISC, MBTI, these are normed, very well defined models. And therefore, anything that we are looking at from assessment angle, we always see whether these are some of the basic principles that are being incorporated by what AI is doing and not taking decisions on its own, right? So, really narrowing AI's decision making framework around these models, which are already normed and thoroughly researched. So, that is first thing that we do. The second is we look at training data to be large and diverse. So, looking from different geographies like India, America, looking at South Africa, Dubai, and many different countries and areas. And we look at diverse data sets also across industries, across levels, junior level, mid level, senior level, and then look at data from multiple angles for reliability and validity. So, testing and retesting and administering it on people regularly, taking their feedback, how relevant it is, and simple things like thumbs up, thumbs down in the assessments help us to really see whether users find this relevant or not. So, constant ability to retest, validate, iterate models is something that we have incorporated as a part of our model. And the third one, which I think you have said, is that we always try to see if we can sort of add a layer of human AI partnership where we are using, at least for high stake decisions, whether that's promotion or hiring, can we use AI as a second opinion and really look at some human being to do a validation check. So that helps us to put these guardrails in place and make AI work for efficiency and speed, personalization, but not really compromising on the quality that we are looking at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I think it's a continuous process, Paul. It's just like always we have to keep looking at newer ways as AI evolves. I think our approaches have to be constantly upgraded to make AI relevant and, most importantly, scientifically validated.
Yeah,
All right,
great.
perfect. So, Paul, again, some expertise on, what do you think are some of the ways in which I've seen that AI can be used to model assessments in engaging and immersive formats like role play, real life simulators, etc. What are you hearing from your clients across the globe on relevance and need for such kind of formats?
Yeah. So I think there's a huge need around that. We've seen it a lot with our large blue chip clients in South Africa,
Mhm,
specifically in the sort of call center space, sales agent space, where traditionally, the clients have put candidates through an assessment process, whether it be for selection, whether it be for development, and usually what they've used there is some traditional psychometrics, complemented with simulation, role play type exercises.
mhm,
Um, and they've had reasonable success with that. But the challenge that they've had is as the businesses have grown, so their need to assess more people has grown. And really the crucial challenges they're facing is they can't really scale what they're doing. So if
mhm,
they're doing role plays for call centers or for sales personnel, that is labor intensive.
mhm,
Typically that sort of process would involve a psychologist being the role player. Then, if you're really doing it properly, you would have another psychologist observing what is happening in the role play, to ensure that there's unbiased scoring of the particular role play and what they're observing through the exercise. It's just too long.
mhm,
It's too long. It's too costly in terms of time, and the candidate experience is also quite challenging. So what we're hearing is really about this need to find a solution that they can utilize with sales personnel, with call centers, that they can use at volume. They can assess people at volume. They can obviously the time to assess people will be reduced, and of course, they're also looking for a more cost-effective solution. So we're seeing a big role there for AI, to utilize things like AI chatbots, um, in an online role play focused on the core competencies that align to the call centers or to the sales personnel. And yeah, we can see the demand increasing even further. And it very possibly will still complement their traditional assessments that they are utilizing. But
mhm,
certainly, yeah, South Africa, that's what we're seeing with some of the big banks, with some of the insurance companies, a real big need around that. And they are seeing that AI potentially can play that role for them. And then, of course, there's still a development component to follow that, which is also something that they have been struggling with. So, yeah, I think definitely for us, call centers, sales environments, there's really big opportunities there for AI to come in, and to solve some of those challenges that they are experiencing at the moment.
Okay, all right. So what I hear you say is that the places where there is large workforce and there is constant need to hire, or there is also, I mean, it's really made worse because of attrition numbers, which could be
Yeah,
much higher in call centers. So there's like constant churn of talent, and
Jen.
then get people and then lose them and then get more people. So banks or contact centers, or even, a lot of companies in retail are facing the same challenge. And
Yeah,
in that situation, what you're saying is that it's very difficult to scale hiring process, and therefore
absolutely.
AI can actually provide those. Yeah.
Correct. And just to add to that, it's, when you're doing role plays, and you're using a team of specialists to do that, they have to be trained up.
Mm,
The way they are assessing candidates in those role plays, there's, obviously a fairly
yeah.
structured set of objective criteria, but you know, in terms of the inter-rater reliability, it would have to be high. But if you are obviously using an AI solution, you're creating a much more unbiased, objective way of assessing those candidates. And it's, even though the AI will adapt to the various candidates, you know that it's been done in a very scientific, objective way, and you're not reliant on the training and experience of those particular practitioners in assessing those candidates.
Oh wow, that's like, that's a nested problem, I would say. That first we need to get people quickly, and then we need trainers or assessors, and we need to constantly upskill them as well.
Correct.
So as to really meet the expectations, and even then, expecting completely bias-free approach, scientific and consistent, most importantly, right? Because you have to constantly get
Correct.
people to do this. The consistency is also a big challenge. And plus,
Absolutely.
you're always starting from zero. If a new trainer comes in, you always start from zero. But
Retrain them.
AI is improving, AI is learning more and more. So it's never starting from zero.
Correct. Absolutely.
Interesting. That's quite interesting. In fact, I was talking to one of the clients, and what I also noticed that they are talking about assessment data to become far more nuanced and far more richer. Because now we are not just capturing, we are capturing multiple data points: text data, voice data, emotion data, behavioral data, action data. So, what's happening in that simulator is really allowing AI to pick up different types of angles of how a person is responding, their facial expressions, their voice tone, and so much more than what, say, we can capture from tests like, the written tests. So that
Absolutely.
also brings in richness and reliability to that data.
Definitely.
Awesome. That I love that view. So with that, I want to, move to this next part of the discussion, which is about how are, these rich assessment insights, like the pile of data that we get out of these assessments, how can this be translated into actions and plans? What's your view on, how these assessment reports can successfully be then translated into something which is a part of a learner's life? They improve. And where are organizations really struggling today?
Mm, mm. So I think this is an extremely pertinent point, and it's a challenge that we've come up against all the time with our clients. When we look at assessments, the process that we following with is the candidate completes the assessment. Once they complete the assessment, they go through a feedback process with one of our specialists, with one of our psychologists, which do have a very strong development component to it. And then
Mm,
we supply a development report. But the challenge is, through that process, really what we are doing, and all that we are able to do with the time that we have with the individual, is to really create awareness for that
mm,
individual around who they are, what their strengths are, what are their developmental areas are, how does that align with their careers currently and where they are wanting to move to in the future. Um, so we've only got so much time with them. And really, what needs to follow that process, and it's always something we recommend to our clients, whether
mhm,
we facilitate the process for them or just help them along the way, just point them in the right direction, is to try and ensure that they have a proper structured development process that follows the assessment. And,
Mm,
kind of the reason for that is, it's twofold. On the one hand, the individual is going through the process. And 9 out of 10 times, the candidates will always say to us, what is coming next? What is the business going to do in terms of my development? And our response is always kind of the same thing, that we hope they're going to take it to the next step. And this is what we would do. And we're happy to facilitate that process if we can. Um,
mm,
but the challenge is often not enough happens post
yeah.
our time with the candidates.
Mm,
Um, and again, that could be due to multiple reasons. We don't always know the reason. Sometimes it's a cost issue. Sometimes that they're not bringing us on to take or help the business through the development journey. Sometimes it's a capability issue within the business that they're not able to, they don't have the capacity to then take that data and translate it into some sort of development plan for the candidates, help them through their development journey, whether it's through sending them on courses or working with a mentor, or working with a coach. It just doesn't happen.
mm,
And that has a very negative impact on the whole assessment process, because what happens is, and we experience this when we talk to candidates, they've gone through something similar with maybe a different company, and they'll tell us they went through the assessment, they got the feedback, it was all wonderful, I built some awareness, and nothing else happened. Um,
mm.
and therefore it puts dampens the whole assessment experience for them. So that's where AI is no doubt going to play a very, very crucial role, because of what it can do from a development perspective. So in our business, we are heavily focused on this, working with our clients to introduce AI based development journeys so that candidates can go through the assessments, and at the other end, they can go through a development journey that's purely AI based. Of course, you can incorporate other things on top of that, but they can focus on the key competencies, the key developmental areas that have emerged from the assessments, and they can go through this online exercise
Mm,
with an AI coach, really to focus on their development, focus on their growth, and from the client perspective, it's fantastic because it's easy for them. It's easy to set up.
yeah.
They don't have to give too much of their time in order to make this happen. The system does it all, and they can just support it in the background. So the key thing is AI is going to make a huge impact from a development perspective. We're extremely excited about it, and our clients are extremely excited about the power that it brings to that process.
Wow, that was so amazing. And I can just go on and on if I had a lot of time, but I'm so excited to hear that because, we have some clients who've joined us today, and we always feel that what life would have been without, say, a platform and, managing those journeys, it would have been Excel sheets, follow-ups, data collection, one after the other, and how with AI and with technology, that reality changes and it goes into scaling. And I think the direction for all of us as practitioners should be that how do we reduce that administrative time
Yeah.
and make our HR managers, HR teams more and more productive and smart thinkers instead of them really wasting their time managing those Excel sheets. So I think that is such an important point, Paul. And I think with future, hopefully AI agents should be able to do that work for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think from my side, personal development is extremely hard.
Hmm.
I think technical development in many ways is easier. You need to upskill from an Excel perspective. You can go and do a course, it's a lot easier. Personal development is difficult because it's who you are as a person. And therefore, we need to make it as easy and
Yeah.
as available, accessible to candidates as possible, so that they can go in that development journey and see growth in themselves, because that's really what we're wanting out of utilizing assessments and infusing it with AI.
Exactly. Wow. I just love that thought. And on that, we are coming to an end to this session, this interesting and really fun session. So I'll just ask you one last question and then maybe last couple of minutes for questions from the audience. Would you like to just have some remarks on assessment data? How can organizations use this data more creatively apart from, just producing data reports for individuals? How can they use this more creatively?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's also another important point. Companies who are using assessments at scale, and we deal with a lot of those, they have so much data, and they don't make enough use out of that data. And we always try and communicate to them that you're sitting with so many data points sitting on in a folder in the cloud, and no one's utilizing it, and no one's making sense of it, and the business isn't extracting value from it. So I think one of the key things is companies have to think about what are the key metrics that they're looking for. What are the key metrics that are going to make a difference from for their business, whether it's looking at identifying potential for succession planning purposes, whether it's looking at how data can impact upon learning and development initiatives. They got to look at what those metrics are, and then obviously work with that data and relate it back to those metrics. So with our clients, um, and given some of the different products, assessment products that we utilize, so one in particular looks at assessing strategic capability, and that allows us to determine what an individual's current strategic capability is now and what it will be in the future, and when that potential will be realized. So we use that assessment extensively with a lot of our clients across all levels. And one of the things we've done at a high level, looking at volumes of data, is to break that down for those clients to understand what is their talent bench strength. What does it look like now? What's it going to look like 5 years from now? And what's it going to look like 10 years from
Mm,
now? And they can
mm,
use that data because that's a key thing they're looking for. They're looking succession planning. We come across that all the time. Companies saying to us, we don't know what our talent looks like. We don't know whether we have enough internally in the business to become the future leaders in the organization, or do we, or are we going to have to look outside of the business and bring talent in? So that's one way where we've aggregated data, aligning directly with succession planning across those different years, 5, 10, 15, and longer term, so companies can get a real sense of what their talent bench strength looks like. Of course, AI is going to add a level to that. And AI is going to make it easier to aggregate the data much faster, much more simply, ensuring that the data is anonymous.
mm,
And that's just going to uplift it to another level. So
mm,
companies really need to understand that they have so much data. They just need to learn how to work with it, but you need to know where you're going.
mm.
So some of our clients, I know they sometimes, send the data off to their actuaries in their businesses. The actuaries can analyze the data really well, but they don't actually know what they're trying to achieve with the data. So
Yeah.
that really needs to be clear. And I think with the advent of AI, we really are going to be able to, obviously, we know we can analyze, aggregate large scales of data, align it back to key metrics, and that's going to just provide so much richness and useful insights and intelligence for businesses when it comes to strategy, structure, and people.
Mm. Wow, amazing. So we have to look at it from two lenses. We have to look at data that's instantly available and how it translates into our goals, which could be bench strength management, capability, succession, and many other use cases.
Absolutely.
Awesome. This was lovely. Thank you so much, Paul. And I'm going to open the floor for the questions. I know we are overshooting time, but some questions we would love to accept. So, team, all attendees, please, thank you so much for joining us. And any questions that you have, we are very happy to take them. You can put it in the Q&A bucket and we can pick that up. Okay, so Paul, Ella asks, how can assessments ensure fairness and mitigation bias in AI assessment tools?
Yeah. So very good question. So I think when when it comes to AI assessments, they are going to have to follow, and they do have to follow a similar process to your traditional assessments. So being a psychologist, whenever I come across new assessments, whether it's a traditional assessment, gamified, or it's an AI-based assessment, I am going to look at the research to see what the research says. And it's really three core areas that the assessment has to meet. And those are, and I think, Nikita, you mentioned them high level through the discussion, but it's three things. We're looking at validity, we're looking at reliability, and then we're looking at fairness and bias. So obviously this question specifically looks at fairness and bias, but all three are really important. So we have to ensure that the AI assessment is, number one, it's valid. So it is assessing what it purports to be assessing. Okay. Number two, it's got to be reliable. So in other words, if someone takes the assessment today and they take the assessment 6 months from now, there will be consistency in the results. And then in terms of fairness, and I guess this depends on the context. So if I'm talking from a South African perspective, there's really strong legislation that underpins psychometric assessment use in our environment, looking at cultural fairness or cultural unbias. And that might differ, in different countries. But typically what we would do is we would look at ensuring that across different cultural groups, that there isn't any level of bias coming through where certain groups, certain cultures are scoring exceptionally higher in the assessments compared to other groups. So we would have to mitigate for that bias. And in the, so companies who develop these tools as part of their research, they would have to have looked at the assessments across different groups to ensure that there is no bias emerging. And if there is bias emerging, then you obviously have to go back to the actual structure of the assessment, and looking what is potentially causing that. Similarly with gender, we always do that as well. We're looking at, is there any gender bias that is coming through? Typically with assessments, you're looking for results that are approximating a normal distribution. And you need to have something similar across different groups. So that's really part of the development phase of the assessments. If you are using an AI assessment, what I would strongly encourage you to do is to look at the research before you start using it. I think one of the challenges, we've seen this in the gamification space, there are a lot of tools that have come out. Some research is a lot more robust than other research. And there've been a lot of question marks about whether the research behind some of those gamified assessments actually stacks up to your traditional assessments. And therefore, I strongly encourage you, with all new assessments coming out that are AI based or any other assessment, is to look through the research manuals. In those manuals, you'll see what they've done around bias. But that's built into how the actual assessment is constructed and how it's been validated. And you need to have that research in place. If it's not there, then there's probably a reason why it's not there. And that potentially is a tool you don't want to utilize.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. That's such an important call out. We have a couple of more questions, so maybe in a few minutes we can pick up. So Harold asks, beyond tools, what structural changes drive sustained action or development plans?
Sorry, just repeat that again. I just lost it for a second.
Beyond tools, what structural changes drive sustained action on development plans?
Sure. So I think, when it's a very good question, because I think one of the challenges with development, and if I'm understanding the question correctly, is how to sustain that, how to ensure that you actually keep the development going. And I think that links a lot into the change process, the communication, and the culture of development. Because we've seen it even if you're going through a coaching process, a face-to-face or online coaching development process with the individual, it's about sustaining that process so that people don't peel off or they don't lose focus and they don't lose interest. So I think it is about building a culture of development from the top down so that the culture embraces and really encourages, and it's part of the strategic drivers of the business that people really need to focus on their own development. And of course, if you can bring that development back to what are the key behavioral drivers of the business, then it links directly into the strategy of the business. So there has to be a lot of that buy-in in order to sustain it. A lot of communication, in the build up to the assessment process, moving into the development journey. There needs to be a lot of communication from the business in terms of why are we going to do this, how are we going to do it, how it's going to work, how are we going to support the process. For businesses that don't have a culture around that, this is a sort of a culture change process. So you need the change management around it. And then on top of that, that the development journey is obviously engaging and it's stimulating and it's enjoyable so that there's a good, candidate experience, because we know the challenge of development is people get busy. People get busy with their core responsibilities and their KPAs and things like that. And development somehow takes I guess it's secondary. So you have to tie that into what people are doing, tie that into performance management, that it's really incumbent upon them to really develop and really grow, and understanding how their development links into where it is that they want to go in their careers, where they want to go within the organization themselves. So they understand that there's a personal component. For me, I want to develop and grow, but it's also tied into my career and where I want to go into my career. Um, these kinds of solutions don't work when they just thrown in. There has to
Mm.
be work done around that so that people buy into the process, and that it's sustained throughout.
Perfect. Yeah, that's so important, right? So those commitment levels are like so critical to any sustained action, and also that it should be fun.
Yeah.
One last question, Paul. I'm so sorry, but I think let's just cover this one last question as well, which is that any suggestions on data privacy considerations when we are using assessment tools?
So I think that probably depends which country you're in. Um, so I mean, I know, with the tools that we typically use, and depending where we are using them, again, you have to find that out from the provider. So if you're in America, if you're in South Africa, there are different acts in place. In South Africa, we have, something called PAPIA that you have
Mm.
to adhere to. So I think that's really, because it's an important question, and it's a very relevant question, and you have to understand that before you go into using whichever assessment tool. It might be the data sitting on a platform, things like where are the servers hosted, how that works. Different countries have different regulations. So in our business we have a platform that's hosted here. In our other business we have the servers hosted in Europe, in Cyprus. So it has to be GDPR compliant and all of that. So you obviously just need to speak to that supplier in terms of data privacy and whether it's compliant within your region. I don't know, Nikita, if you can share your sort of experience around that, working globally and dealing with that as well.
Yeah, I think, Paul, that's 100% true that for every region, data privacy requirements are quite unique and different. But I think one thing, as you rightly said, is common is that assessment data is very sensitive. So
Yeah.
within organization also, open circulation is not allowed, and it's only for some restricted people, your coaches, your assessors who can see this. And people are very guarded when it comes to data. And therefore, as assessment providers, all of us are really mindful of who gets access to that report. So
Yeah.
I think it's about how HR defines it, but usually it's about an individual, their preference of who should see their data. And that I think follows as the golden rule for us to just that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think in assessments in general, when you're going through, say, a development assessment process in companies, sometimes, individuals can be skeptical as to why they're being assessed. And of course, that comes down to, not everyone's as trusting and they're not sure what the intentions are sometimes of going through the assessments. So it's important upfront to understand, for the candidate to understand exactly why the assessments are being used, who has access to the data, what are the outputs, how it's going to be used, all of that in the initial comms, so that they buy into the process and it eases their anxiety around it. And transparency is important around who's going to have access to the information, like Nikita said.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So it's always, more about keeping them informed and keeping that communication very open that, these are the people that are going to get access to data.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So I think, Paul, if I'll have more questions, I'll send it your way and we'll wait for your reply. But this was a wonderful session. We learned a lot, and we definitely are looking forward to more insightful sessions with you. But thank you so much for joining us today and really giving us some amazing insights on the industry and how South African market is.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And thank you, Nikita. Thanks for inviting me and great to engage with you all. And happy if there are any other questions, I'll certainly answer those for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day ahead, Paul. Thank you, everyone who's joined us today. And yes, have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.